The ruling overturning Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein's conviction for sex crimes is being seen by some as a setback for the Me Too movement, especially the more than 100 women who accused him of assault and harassment. Weinstein was convicted 4 years ago of 2 sex crimes in New York and sentenced to 23 years in prison, but continued to deny any non-consensual sexual activity. Well, now the New York State Court of Appeals has overturned that conviction. Let's bring in our defense attorney, Misty Marris, to discuss why. Misty, good morning to you. So this is about the testimony relating to prior bad acts. Explain how that testimony and those witnesses led to this decision to overturn.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. So basically in New York State, prior bad act witnesses, meaning witnesses that have nothing to do with the charges that are actually against the person in the courtroom. There is a very, very narrow set of circumstances in New York where prior bad act testimony, uncharged crimes, witnesses relating to an individual's propensity to commit a crime is allowed in. In the Harvey Weinstein case, 4 women whose allegations were not charged were permitted to testify before the court. The appellate court looked at that and said, this was improper under the New York State rules relating to prior bad acts. It was too prejudicial to the defendant. And in addition to that, because all of that information, all of those uncharged crimes could be a part of cross-examination, if Harvey Weinstein were to take the stand, it actually hindered his ability to testify in his own defense. So it's a very, very technical legal argument. And in New York, it is a very narrow set of circumstances where that type of evidence comes in. And the appellate court said this was a bridge too far. The judge allowed evidence in that should not have come into the courtroom. Therefore, this verdict is thrown out. And now the case needs to be retried.
Harvey Weinstein will not be going home. He will be moved from one facility to another as he awaits a new trial. Without those witnesses that speak to the prior bad acts, is this case harder to prove in this impending new trial?
Yes, this is what the prosecution is going to have to grapple with. Are they going to actually retry Harvey Weinstein? To your point, he's also convicted in California. He's serving a 16-year sentence. So that California verdict is not impacted by the New York State Court of Appeals decision. Now that verdict is also going to be appealed, but the legal standards are a bit different in California. And there's a rule that's a bit more broad as to what evidence can come into the courtroom. But in New York, prosecutors are going to have to really look at this case and think, if all of this other evidence is not going to come into the courtroom, is it likely that Harvey Weinstein would be convicted? And there's so many other aspects to this, Victor, that prosecutors need to grapple with. For instance, are they going to re-traumatize the victims in this case who would have to testify again, the 2 complainants that are at the core of this prosecution? So there's a whole analysis as to whether or not this case would actually be retried. And I think a lot of it will hinge on whether or not the California verdict stands.
Ronan Farrow, who's extensively reported on Harvey Weinstein's, the allegations, the convictions, said something interesting in his conversation with Jake Tapper, in which he said that the prior bad acts witnesses and overturning in the Harvey Weinstein case could inform what we watch in the Trump hush money trial and bringing in witnesses there. Is there some residue on how we understand the Trump case from the Harvey Weinstein case?
Absolutely. It's very directly related. So this appellate court decision is binding on New York State courts. And the reason why Harvey Weinstein is pretty much universally disliked, right? But from a legal perspective, this decision impacts any other case where there's a defendant where prior bad act testimony, prior bad act evidence is going to come into the courtroom. The reason that it directly impacts Trump is on 2 fronts. Number one, uncharged crimes, uncharged acts, uncharged information coming into the courtroom. Well, the judges made decisions where uncharged information and prior bad acts is actually going to come into the Trump courtroom. The other aspect of this is this idea of whether or not the defendant is basically left with the option of only staying silent. They cannot testify. This week, the Sandoval hearing. A Sandoval hearing is a New York State procedure where prosecutors are told by the judge what evidence can come in on cross-examination. This is directly impacted by the appellate decision in the Trump case because the judge decided that the E. Jean Carroll case can come in on cross, that the New York State Attorney General civil fraud finding can come in on cross-examination if Trump were to testify. I would expect Trump's arguments to be exactly the same, that because the judge is allowing all of this other stuff in, he has no choice but to stay silent, and that impacts his right to testify. So this decision is teeing up some significant appellate issues. Depending on the Trump case turns out, they will be very, very relevant to that case.
Misty Marris, always helping us understand it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. We'll be right back.